Admitting difficulty does not diminish resilience. Rather, resilience emerges through confronting hardship honestly. Take a second and just really let that sink in. We live in this world that is constantly screaming at us to project strength, to never ever show weakness and to just hustle until we literally drop. But what if we've got it all backward? What if the ultimate form of strength is actually vulnerability? Well, welcome to our latest explainer. Today, we're taking a seriously fascinating journey into the raw, unfiltered reality of what it actually takes to survive and thrive in a completely chaotic world. We are going to extract some profoundly universal life lessons hidden inside a sprawling, hours-long conversation from the Joe Rogan Experience featuring comedian Joey Diaz. Now, this wasn't just some casual chat between two incredibly successful guys. It was a literal masterclass in survival. We're going to take their decades of shared history together, covering everything from the brutal, unforgiving world of stand-up comedy to the realities of aging, martial arts, and some really deep personal struggles. And we're organizing the whole thing into a clear, actionable blueprint for reinvention. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First up, the art of authenticity. Second, we'll look at vulnerability and aging. Third, martial arts and adaptability. And finally, we'll wrap up with redefining genuine success. Starting off with Section 1, the art of authenticity and finding your true voice. Both Rogan and Diaz have built absolute powerhouse, legendary careers. But that success, it definitely wasn't born from some natural, polished perfection right out of the gate. Their journey perfectly illustrates this massive, gaping canyon between public perception and the behind-the-scenes reality. Audiences look at successful comedians and just assume it was instant fame, like it's this overnight success driven by pure, innate genius. But the reality? The reality is a grinding, painful, and deeply humbling process. It's bombing on stage. It's awkward experimentation. It's facing relentless public judgment night after night. Real achievement is honestly just the result of recovering from failure over and over again. And a massive part of that brutal training happened at the legendary Comedy Store out in Los Angeles. For guys like Rogan and Diaz, that place wasn't just a venue where you go tell a few jokes. It was an intensely competitive training ground. It was this crazy environment where brand new comics were sharing the exact same space as huge established stars. And it taught them 4 incredibly critical survival lessons. First, discipline. You just had to show up, write, and perform consistently, no excuses. Second, humility. Because believe me, even the absolute best performers would go up there and bomb in front of a tough crowd. Third, adaptability. You had to learn on the fly how to adjust your entire set to a completely different audience vibe. And crucially, brotherhood. Because creative growth rarely happens in isolation. Having a tight-knit community to support you through those inevitable setbacks, that was the secret sauce to their survival. Which brings us to this incredible realization, especially for Joey Diaz. People connect with authenticity, not perfection. In his early years, Diaz spent so much energy just heavily focusing on crafting jokes, sometimes even trying to imitate the style of other comics, but it just wasn't working. It wasn't until he completely stopped trying to be what he thought a comedian should be, and instead started leaning heavily into his own unique, highly flawed, intensely personal stories, that audiences truly started to connect with him. Technical skill absolutely matters, for sure, but at the end of the day, audiences, and really just people in general, respond most powerfully to absolute sincerity. Moving on to Section 2, vulnerability and aging and how we adapt to physical reality. So shifting the tone here just a bit, we hit a deeply, universally human reality. It doesn't matter how much wealth or fame you accumulate, you simply cannot escape the physical reality of a body that eventually breaks down. It forces all of us to ask this incredibly direct question: how do we adapt when our bodies change? Whether you're a massive celebrity podcaster or you're working a standard 9-to-5, your physical limitations will shift at some point. And honestly, how you answer this question pretty much dictates the entire second half of your life. Diaz actually went through a pretty significant knee surgery recently, and he speaks with this striking vulnerability about what that experience actually felt like. He noted, "Recovery requires patience. Modern culture celebrates rapid solutions, yet healing typically unfolds gradually." Think about that. For a guy who is totally used to fiercely guarding his independence, that sudden loss of mobility, dealing with the pain, the tedious physical therapy, it's incredibly frustrating. But by coming out and speaking about his fear and his discomfort so openly, Diaz proves that vulnerability isn't a weakness at all. It's actually a sign of massive emotional strength. So, the crucial takeaway here is how you actually process this physical reality day to day. Rogan and Diaz map out a very clear path. Step one is simply facing the disruption of your routine head on without any denial. You just have to accept it. Step two is committing to the gradual, let's face it, often super boring, consistent work of rehabilitation, which, by the way, aligns perfectly with Rogan's intense focus on proactive physical maintenance. And then there's step three, which is arguably the most important one, accepting your changing limitations without surrendering your vitality. Aging doesn't have to mean some total tragic decline. It just requires adjustment, a bit of wisdom, and a fierce, unapologetic commitment to taking care of yourself. And right alongside the physical therapy is the mental therapy. Humor acts as a vital psychological tool for processing pain and building up your resilience. When Diaz sits there joking about his bad knee, he isn't just deflecting or avoiding the problem. Psychologists actually widely recognize that humor allows us to reduce our inner tension and gain some much-needed emotional distance from our hardships. Laughing at your difficulties doesn't magically erase them, obviously, but it gives you that renewed energy and strength to actually face them head on.
All right, Section 3, Martial Arts and Adaptability. Testing assumptions in real time.
Throughout their conversation, martial arts serves as this incredibly powerful metaphor for testing what actually works when you're put under pressure. Decades ago, traditional martial arts often involved this really rigid adherence to specific styles and unquestioned techniques. But then, the UFC emerged, and it completely revolutionized things by introducing practical, real-world testing. They evaluated all those unquestioned claims under realistic, totally chaotic conditions. Suddenly, everyone saw that leverage and proper technique could actually allow smaller individuals to overcome much larger opponents. And the broader lesson here extends way beyond fighting. Your ideas have to be tested by real experience, not just blindly accepted because that's how it's always been done. This whole concept of relentless adaptability really echoes the core philosophy of the iconic Bruce Lee. His famous principle, absorb what is useful, is a brilliant framework for everyday personal development. Just think about how these ideas apply to your own life. Discipline builds the baseline competence you need to survive. Respect acknowledges that you can learn something valuable from literally anyone. Humility forces you to admit your vulnerabilities so you can actually fix them. And the confidence that results from all of that, that's what reduces your fear of the unknown. Flexibility and adaptability aren't just fighting strategies, folks. They are the ultimate tools for thriving in a completely unpredictable world. And speaking of an unpredictable world, the conversation also shifts into geopolitics, specifically regarding Cuba, which reflects Diaz's own heritage. The discussion touches on infrastructure challenges, economic hardships, the really complex historical circumstances, and hopes for future political change. The source material is clear that complex geopolitical questions like this rarely ever have simple, easy solutions, and raw statistics only tell a tiny fraction of the story. What Diaz brings to the table here is lived emotional reflection. Hearing personal stories about how massive, abstract political issues impact ordinary, everyday people creates a profound sense of empathy. It really just shows us that real-life human experience always adds a crucial layer of understanding that you just can't get from the data alone. Finally, Section 4, Redefining Genuine Success. The value of independence and connection. So we've talked about the brutal grind of comedy, we've talked about physical aging, and developing a fighter's mindset. But what is all this struggle actually for? Interestingly enough, both Rogan and Diaz completely reject our standard definition of conventional success. Society tells us from day one that achievement is measured exclusively by wealth, fame, and this uninterrupted, constant upward trajectory. If you aren't always moving up and making more, society basically says you're failing. But their lived experience proves that this definition is completely hollow. Let's break down the metrics here. Under the conventional measure, the ultimate goal is always wealth and fame. But for Diaz and Rogan, the goal is personal fulfillment. Convention says that your status is all about public recognition. They argue that true status is having decades-long, unbreakable relationships and mutual loyalty with your friends. Convention says a successful career means gaining corporate approval and climbing the ladder. They say it's having the independent freedom to say exactly what you want when you want. Decades of shared history prove to both of them that real success is living according to your own internal values, not constantly seeking external validation. And the technology that allowed them to truly capture and scale that independent freedom was podcasting. Podcasting essentially democratized success by entirely removing the traditional gatekeepers, the television executives and the major corporate networks. It allowed creators to speak directly, authentically, and freely to a community of loyal listeners. It essentially proved that you no longer need institutional permission to build your own platform and share your unvarnished truth with the world.
So let's bring it all together and see how this builds into our ultimate conclusion. Every single story shared by these two men, every laugh, every moment of raw vulnerability points directly to these 5 core survival skills. The blueprint for reinvention is right here. Accept that life will rarely go to your carefully laid out plan. Continue learning and stay completely open to new, uncomfortable ideas. Embrace your failures as your greatest teachers. Stay fiercely, unapologetically authentic. And above all else, persist through the long term, because that is how you survive the chaos.
Which leaves us with one final vital thought to consider based on everything we've unpacked today. What area of your own life is due for an authentic reinvention? Is it your career, your health? Maybe it's how you define success itself. Take a moment to really sit with that and think about it.